each flake glittering like ash against the endless dark. The barn groaned under the weight of the storm, wind whistling through its cracks as though the night itself wished to pry it open. Taza Redhawk pushed the heavy door inward, shoulders dusted white, his breath steaming in the frigid air. He had returned only to check on his mare, to lay another armful of hay. But what he found stopped him as though the storm had turned to stone around him. There, curled in the straw like a creature driven to ground, lay a woman. Her dress, silk once meant for parlors and chandeliers, clung sodden to her body, hem stained with mud, threads catching the lamplight in shimmers of gold and ruin. Her hair spilled across her face, a pale halo darkened with snowmelt. And beneath her clasped hands, unmistakable even through fabric, rose the swell of unborn life. For a long breath, Taza stood motionless. His people had taught him that chance arrivals carried omens. A stranger on the snow could mean fortune or disaster. He had lived long enough to know both wore the same face at first. Still, something inside him, a tether he had thought long severed, pulled him closer. The woman stirred, lashes fluttering. Her eyes opened, gray as storm clouds, sharpening when they met his. She did not scream. Instead, she straightened against the straw, every gesture stiff with pride. "I'll go," she said hoarsely, voice cracked from cold. "Come morning. I won't trouble you." Taza studied her. The way her shoulders trembled from exhaustion, the way her hands pressed against her belly in protection. Her words were defiance, but her body was surrender. He set down his bundle of wood and shrugged the buffalo robe from his back, draping it over her without a word. The heat from his skin still clung to it. She inhaled sharply, as though kindness hurt worse than the cold. "You'll freeze," she whispered. He lowered himself beside the mare's stall, broad chest bare to the chill, arms resting over bent knees. His silence was not cruelty, but habit. Words had long been wasted on those who refused to hear an Apache speak. At last, his voice came, low as gravel under snow. "From now on," he murmured, gaze fixed on the fireless dark, "you're mine." The words struck her like a blow. She pulled the robe tighter, face flushing though the air bit with frost. She thought of all the names town gossips had given her, spoiled, ruined, cursed. Now this wild, exiled man dared to claim her too. Yet something in his tone was different. Not ownership, but promise. Still, fear tangled with her shame. She turned away, whispering into the straw. "You don't know what I've lost." The storm raged. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the mare's steady chewing and the restless moan of timber. Taza did not sleep. He watched the rise and fall of her breath, the way she twitched awake as though chased by memories. Once, she stirred too sharply, a cry escaping her lips as a pain rippled through her body. His hand moved instinctively, steadying her shoulder. She flinched, then met his eyes. For the first time she saw not just a giant, but a man weathered by his own storms. Scar traced down his jaw, shadows carved deep beneath his cheekbones, eyes tired yet steady as stone. "You should have gone to town," he said finally. Her laugh was brittle. "And beg." She pressed a hand to her belly, voice sinking. "They already look at me like I'm a scandal walking. A widow carrying a child and no fortune left. I'd sooner die in a barn than under their stairs." He understood. Judgment could cut colder than winter, sharper than hunger. He had borne its weight since boyhood, marked savage in every glance. Between them, shame formed a bond neither had asked for. He rose, towering, and fed another armful of hay to the mare. Then he lit the single lantern swinging overhead, filling the barn with a soft amber glow. Light brushed her features. Hollow cheeks, lips cracked, eyes ringed with exhaustion. She looked younger in it and more fragile, like glass on the edge of breaking. "I don't want your pity," she whispered. Taza turned, resting one hand on the lantern post. "And I don't give it." She searched his face, desperate to find mockery, yet finding only plain truth. She clutched the robe, letting its weight anchor her. For the first time since her husband's death, since debts had stripped her of home and kin, she felt the faintest ember of safety flicker inside her. Fragile, unearned, but real. Outside, the storm deepened. Snow piled high against the barn door, sealing them together. Evelina, though she had not yet given him her name, shifted on the straw, her body too weary to fight another hour. She closed her eyes, surrendering not to him, but to the warmth that cloaked her. Taza returned to his post on the floor, arms folded, gaze fixed on the door. Yet his thoughts were not on intruders, nor even the storm. They lingered on her words, her refusal to beg, her fear of the town's judgment. He knew the danger well. The people would not forgive her for seeking shelter in the home of an outcast. A faint sound broke the silence. Hoofbeats. Distant, muffled by snow, but growing closer. Taza stiffened, rising with predator's grace, lantern light painting shadows across his bare chest. He crossed to the door, hand poised near the latch, ears straining against the wind. Evelina stirred, blinking awake, alarm flooding her features. "Who is it?" she whispered, clutching the robe around her shoulders. Taza did not answer. The hoofbeats slowed, crunching in the drifts just beyond the barn. A voice carried through the storm, sharp, familiar, filled with suspicion. "Evelina Marston. We know you're in there." Her face drained of color. She pressed both hands to her belly, trembling. The storm was no longer the only thing pressing against the walls. Judgment had found her. And Taza Redhawk, shirtless and silent, stood like a dark sentinel between her and the world that would not forgive. Snow still pressed against the barn doors when dawn bled pale across the horizon. By morning, Evelina Marston was no longer hidden. Word had traveled quicker than fire across dry grass. In a town where whispers were sharper than knives, it was enough that one set of eyes had glimpsed her silhouette through the cracks, wrapped in a buffalo robe that did not belong to her. By midday, the saloon was humming with it. Miriam Price, who kept the dry goods store, leaned across the counter toward Sheriff Hayes, her voice low enough to lure attention yet loud enough to be heard. "Found in a barn, Sheriff. With him. A woman in her condition. What would her husband think?" Her tongue clicked like the swinging clock in her shop, steady in judgment. Sheriff Hayes sipped his coffee, eyes narrowing. "Her husband's been in the ground near 2 years, Miriam. What he thinks don't matter. What matters is order. A widow of her standing gone to an Apache's bed? The whole county will be restless." The blacksmith at the next table grunted. "Don't call it a bed. Savage probably took her against her will." Miriam's eyes glittered. Or perhaps she gave herself. Hunger makes strange bargains. The word spread, twining through streets like smoke. By the time Evelina set foot in town, cloaked in wool borrowed from Taza's stores, every gaze burned with unasked questions. Her boots sank deep into the slush, each step heavier for the silence that followed her. She kept her chin high, though shame gnawed like hunger at her ribs. Beside her, Taza walked with a steady tread, bareheaded despite the cold, shoulders broad enough to take each glare and swallow it whole. He did not flinch when mothers pulled their children close. He did not answer when men spat on the ground as they passed. Evelina's breath stuttered, but his pace never faltered, as if his silence itself was a shield. They reached the mercantile. Evelina needed flour, salt, simple cloth for mending. The shop smelled of cinnamon and starch, warm against the sting of frost. Yet warmth did not mean welcome. Miriam Price looked up from her ledger, lips pursed tight enough to draw blood. "Well," she said, voice crisp as breaking ice, "I never thought I'd see the day. Mrs. Marston, how far you've fallen." The words cut deeper than Evelina expected. Once, she had been welcomed with smiles, her husband's wealth buying easy respect. Now she was only a burden with a belly full of a dead man's child. She wanted to beg, just a yard of cloth, a sack of flour, but pride strangled her voice. Taza stepped forward, laying coin on the counter with a steady hand. "What's needed?" he said simply. Miriam's nostrils flared. She looked from the coin to Evelina's downcast eyes, then back to the man whose presence unsettled the room. Slowly, deliberately, she shoved the coin aside with her fingertip. "I don't take Apache money." The store went still. Evelina's cheeks burned, humiliation and fury colliding. She opened her mouth, ready to plead for once, but Taza laid a hand over hers, warm and steady, pressing her silence into strength. His gaze never left Miriam's. and his voice came low and even. "Then take hers." Evelina drew in a sharp breath. She had nothing, no purse, no ring left to trade. Yet in his tone was no mockery, only defiance, an insistence that she was not invisible, not erased. She swallowed, straightening. "I will pay when I can," she said, her voice trembling but audible. Miriam hesitated. Something in the widow's bearing, the steel rising where there had once been silk, made her falter. At last she slid the flower across, muttering, "For the sake of the child." They left with only half what they needed, but Evelina walked taller than she had entered. Outside, the gossip clung sharper than frost, but beneath her shame pulsed a new ember. A strange, fragile dignity, as though she had borrowed some of Taza's steadiness by standing near him. That night, back in the barn, she stitched by lantern light, her fingers clumsy from cold. The fabric was coarse, the needle dull, but each thread bound more than cloth. She was mending his shirt, torn from years of work. The gesture surprised her. She told herself it was payment, gratitude, necessity. Yet as she sewed, she watched his silhouette in the corner. How he carved wood in silence, leaving small figures on the ledge. She traced one with her finger, a bird mid-flight, wings spread wide. "Why do you carve them?" she asked, breaking the hush. He looked up, eyes catching firelight. "Because even in storms, birds remember sky." The answer lodged deep in her chest. She bent again to her stitching, but her vision blurred with sudden tears she refused to let fall. Outside, the wind carried voices. Boys near the saloon jeered about the Apache's woman. A man's laugh rang cruel against the frozen night. Evelina's hand stilled on the fabric. The